There's many ways you could think of that and imagine what it might have been like. But I think the first place to start is that if you really met the Buddha, what I mean by it is some people probably did really meet the Buddha, and others kind of saw through filters. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you're one of those men and women who really met the Buddha during his lifetime, actually all your thoughts would stop. All your preconceptions, all your narrative would be interrupted, at least for a short while, maybe for a few moments, maybe for a few minutes, maybe for a few hours, maybe for the rest of your life. But that's what it would be like, because Buddha was, as an enlightened being, awakened being, he was just so utterly and completely there, in opposition to us who are kind of anywhere but here. We're all over the place with our thoughts and fantasies and delusions and prejudices. We're anywhere else other than right here and now in the present moment. But Buddha, having cut through all that delusion, that chain of kind of ego clinging and neurosis and error, was just so fundamentally and overwhelmingly honest to the present moment. Not even the sense of rising above it or floating in some kind of space above it, just utterly there in reality as it is, unfabricated, completely natural, without division, without disturbing emotions, without error, which is actually the fundamental nature of our mind too, but we just never seem to rest in it. But Buddha had kind of cut that chain of delusion and was utterly and fully present. So if you met the Buddha on the road in northern India, modern-day province of Bihar or Bengal, you had that opportunity, maybe that your thoughts would stop at that moment, because you would be just face to face with reality, the nature of the stripped down nature of your mind, the same as the Buddha's, in fact. And that would be the beginning of your journey to enlightenment, most likely, because you'd had that overwhelming experience. And but not everybody would have had that kind of experience, because we mostly, leading up to that point of kind of collision with the Buddha, those people, those men and women, would be spinning around in their own kind of nets of projections and worries and agitations and aggressions, creating their own narratives, creating their own stories, being the stars and directors of their own stories. So when we're in that kind of frame, spinning our own fantasies, we do encounter new things, we do encounter fresh things, but we mostly see them through a filter, a distortion of all those, that accumulated set of habits and mistakes that we bring to it. So we see not as it is, but we see not even, through a glass darkly, as St. Paul said somewhere. We certainly see through a glass very darkly. And therefore we project all kinds of mistakes and errors upon whoever or whatever we meet. So it would have been the same for many of the people who met the Buddha. They could only see him through very distorted lenses and fit him into their pre-existing narratives, pre-existing concepts. So if we start from that, then we can imagine that for some people meeting the Buddha nearly 2,500 years ago, on those dusty trails of northern India, perhaps somewhere between Bodh Gaya, the place of enlightenment, when he was 35, and his final passing, Kushinagara, at the age of 80, where they met him on those dusty trails in those forest groves and so on. Some of them might have thought, oh, wasn't he the guy who was there, was some kind of a noble, from some noble family? It was some kind of prince or something from the Shakya clan, that clan that was dominant on the northern India and modern-day Nepali border. Wasn't he a prince one time? And why is he now dressed like this? Why is he dressed like some kind of wandering religious seeker? Why isn't he back home in the palace with his wife and children, maybe running his father's kingdom now? Why isn't he doing that? So in other words, they see him as some kind of royal dropout, some kind of ex-prince, one time powerful guy, one time future ruler of some chunk of territory, now just some kind of wandering yogi, like quite a few of these other people around nowadays, who is kind of dropped out, become a wanderer. So some would see him like that. Some might think, well, then he's one of those guys like the followers of that guy Mahavira, the people who are Jains, those non-violent guys, and so on. Others might think, well, is he like a Brahmin, some kind of hereditary priest from the Vedic religion? Does he do sacrifices? Does he control the gods? There'd be so many things that, or is he like those materialists who reject all religion? They tried to fit him into all these categories because India at that time, northern India at least, was rapidly changing. Old religious and social certainties were collapsing, but still there are some things that were quite strong. So the Brahmanical religion, the Vedic religion, that is to say, where people are worshipping the gods of the directions, the gods of the elements through sacrifice, some animals, some not animal sacrifice, and trying to control things, the natural world, through that. But of course, Buddha wasn't one of those. He totally rejected such kind of ideas, and not rejecting the gods entirely, but just they're irrelevant to the true spiritual quest, which is to overcome suffering through discovering the true nature of reality. So, yeah, some would see him like that. The ex-priest, the ex-prince, some would see him as one another kind of religious seeker, religious wanderer. But some would actually, their thoughts would just completely stop, and they'd be face to face with the honest truth of, this world of birth, suffering, old age, death, the kind of brutal facts of samsara, and at the same time have a sense that there's freedom from that. There's a possibility of awakening from all that kind of suffering and disappointment and disillusion, simply by being grounded here and now in the present moment, and fully, as it were, breathing in that present moment, awakening to what had always been there since the very beginningless beginning, but which one has allowed oneself to keep forgetting and keep wandering away from. But some would forget to forget just by being in the presence of the Buddha. And some of them became his closest disciples, like the first 5 of his disciples who he met after the awakening, after the enlightenment, which had taken place in Bodh Gaya, when he wandered across to nearby Varanasi, into the deer park there. 5 people he'd known before during his career seeking, his 6 years between renouncing his kingdom and finding enlightenment. Buddha himself was studied with different yogis, different spiritual teachers, trying out different disciplines, some asceticism, some meditation, some philosophical speculation, but really finally exhausting them all because realizing none of them answered the fundamental question of from where does suffering come and how does it end? But once he'd seen through that and seen that it's the very clinging to self, the very privilege of self, the very fantasy that there is such a thing in the world, in our body, in our mind, that locks us into suffering. Once he'd, as it were, destroyed the maker of the house of samsara by simply seeing that it was a fantasy, it was a fiction, he was awakened. No more delusions, no more anxieties, no more baggage, no more narrative. So after 7 weeks after his enlightenment, he meets some of the people he'd been seeking along the path, so to speak, with, and they ask him, what's happening? What is it? What do you know now that we don't? And so to them he proclaimed the so-called Four Noble Truths in that garden in Varanasi. And thus he, as we say in Buddhist tradition, turn the wheel of Dharma to counter the wheel of birth and death on which we're all, until now, been bound. So they were his first disciples, and to them he was the awakened one, the enlightened one. Yet at the same time, and this must have been something quite amazing to them, they'd known him as one of them, just another guy. Yes, a religious seeker. Yes, a dropout from the social system. Somebody who rejected the Vedic religion, who rejected the caste system, but otherwise a living, breathing human being like themselves. And yet now he was free. He was utterly free human being, utterly alert, utterly awakened, and utterly responsive to others. So he was both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. I like to think that's how the first disciples encountered the Buddha. Ordinary, truly most ordinary of all, because not carrying any of the baggage of having to be extraordinary, not having bought into any of those transcendental fantasies, but at the same time utterly different, because so utterly simple and clear and open. So in a way, the record of Buddha's life, I think, the next 45 years of his teaching in northern India, I think it's very much the interplay between, there must have been very much the interplay between that he's a person, a human being who's utterly there and utterly at ease in the world, utterly at ease in his body, utterly at ease in his social setting, utterly at ease in the natural world, yet at the same time not owned by any of it, not owned by anything or anybody or any of his own internal dialogue, because he didn't have one. He just simply and utterly pure, clear, accurate response to the needs of others. So how do you describe that? Well, of course, through your filters. And I guess the people who came to Buddha during that 45 years all had filters of one kind or another through which they're going to try and explain him to themselves, explain his advice and teaching to themselves and to others. And so kind of already as an attempt to explain him and his teachings and what he was and what he represented, all kinds of narratives and stories of the Buddha would be arising. And in a way, the crucial thing is to do this, the crucial thing in all these narratives is to see this interplay of the, if you like, the timeless realm to which Buddha had awakened, the Buddha nature, the true nature of reality, the Dhamma Dhatu, emptiness, the clear light, whichever these metaphors we like to use, and the fact that he's there, right there, just somebody walking along in the fields, walking along the dusty trails, sit down having a meal, sit down responding to the pleas of distressed people, distressed women and men, giving advice to kings and rulers, giving advice to members of the Republican states. All these fully present, fully human, fully interacting, with a precise word, precise language, very clear, very accurate, very undistorted, and yet in a way coming from this entirely different space, beyond time and space, beyond society, beyond the accidents of 2,500-year Indian society, coming from the place of Buddhahood, which is in a way everywhere and nowhere, because it's not located, doesn't belong to anything, is not created by anything, is not made by anything, is the timeless nature of reality, as it always has been, as it always will be. So from one side, in a way, Buddha's there. And that's why we say Buddha's just one of 1,000 Buddhas that could appear in this historical period. And the awakening to which each of these has is exactly the same, to the timeless, unconditioned nature of reality. And beyond the 1,000 Buddhas, there's the Buddhas who dwell in other realms, in other spaces, right up to the Dhammakaya itself, the true nature of the mind of all Buddhas, which is the true nature of our mind, which is never born, which is never produced, which never ages, which is not located anywhere, which is neither high nor low, not even findable as a thing or as an entity, but is just the natural unconditioned reality of all. That's the Dhammakaya realm in which all Buddhas dwell. We dwell there too, except we just don't know it. So Buddha is simultaneously the Dhammakaya, as we say, the true nature of reality, the same as all Buddhas, yet he's there, vital and present in that particular historical form. The guy was once a prince, Sakyamuni, the sage of the Shakya clan, who is there maybe sharing a meal with you, maybe giving you some advice, maybe talking to the monastic disciples, talking to the lay disciples, saying how they should conduct themselves. All those things, totally, utterly present. Not like having to be above anybody, he's above nobody. Yet at the same time, he's utterly different because unconditioned. So, otherwise, he's born, he ages, he has sicknesses, he passes away. But none of this happens to the Dhammakaya, the true nature, which the Buddha has accessed. That's unborn and unceasing. So, as for the human manifestation, the Indian prince, Sakyamuni, yes, that falls to pieces. It said, at the end he dies in Kushinagra. At the end, before then, he becomes ill. He has some kind of food poisoning and suffers from that in the most human of in a way the most human of illnesses imaginable, and very imaginable if you kind of know India at all. So Buddha suffers that, and then he passes. But Buddha mind, Buddha reality, Buddha Dhammakaya never passes. It's a Dhammakaya. So he's gone and he's not gone when he passes away. So out of this kind of reality of the Buddha, and through the filters and the language and the metaphors and analogies that people have to use to talk about what in a way cannot be talked about, that can only be experienced, then the whole kind of story of the Buddha kind of spreads and proliferates. And so and Buddha himself has talked about that, because in his discourses, in his sutras, the oral teaching he gave to his disciples, which later becomes the scriptures, written down as the scriptures, Buddha talks about the nature of Buddhahood. He talks about the nature of awakening to Buddhahood, how in a way for him it was a culmination of many lifetimes of practice. Sometimes he talks about it as if it's something that he was still working on in this life, that he's still got more work to do when he's born into this world in Lumbini, in Nepal. But other times in some discourses he talks more from the point of view of the unchangingness of enlightenment, and therefore to emphasize that, he says, well, even when I appeared in this world, actually I was already manifesting enlightenment. But to show you how to do it, I had to manifest as a human being, performing the 12 great deeds and so on as they described. So I think Buddha switched back and forth between both modalities when he was interacting with people, sometimes emphasizing the human to bring it to others, to allow people to understand if they made efforts like the Buddha made efforts, they too would awaken from the hypnotic spell of delusion and consequent suffering. Other times emphasizing more the timelessness of enlightenment to show to people it's there already. You can't fabricate it. You don't need to produce it through efforts or through labor. You don't earn it by this, that, and the other. It's not a merit system. You don't get a badge of enlightenment if you put in enough labor, because the Buddha nature is naturally present and pure even in you. Just says, and I'm just in a way manifesting that. I'm just, by my presence is just showing you that timeless universal nature of enlightenment. So the Buddha, therefore, we say, in the Mahayana we say, the Buddha's nature is twofold. The Dhammakaya, the true nature of reality, unborn, unceasing, and the Rupakaya, the form body, that by which other people can see him, by which he can communicate. And it's the same for all Buddhas, that everybody who has become a Buddha, everybody who is becoming a Buddha, everybody who will become a Buddha, they all have this twofold nature. And it was, as it were, the essence and then the manifestation. Because without the manifestation, then how could this possibility of enlightenment be communicated to other people, that they could respond to it and think, I can do this true. What he uncovered, I can uncover. He was a human being, I'm a human being, I can uncover it. So, therefore, we talk in this way about the twofold reality of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya. And then it can be even more elaborated in terms of not the form kaya, the body which manifests to others. We can say, well, different people see that differently too. For some people, it'll be very much the very much emphasis will be on he's a human being very much like myself, except he's made this great change. But for others who are more advanced in their practice, more refined in their perception through practice and meditation and so on, they'll see Buddha's form kaya, his manifestation, in a more ethereal, more spiritual way, more radiant way. It's almost like they'll see that through the Buddha's form, through his manifestation, there is the clear light of reality behind it. And so for them, we say the Buddha manifests, for such advanced practitioners, we say the Buddha manifests the Sambhogakaya. It's a Sanskrit term meaning the body of enjoyment, or perhaps we could think the body of glory, of radiant glory. And for that, we could say, whoever sees that has already entered into a very pure, purified realm, a Buddha field, so to speak, to be able to see that. Yet at the same time as Buddha is manifesting, as Buddha Vairochana in the Pure Land of Akinista, he's here on earth 2,500 years ago, teaching as an ordinary Indian guy, except an enlightened Indian guy, to ordinary men and women with troubles and woes. And yet at the same time, his Dharmakaya has never changed, never moved. Doesn't have any diminution, doesn't have any growth. It remains what it is. So Buddha, therefore, is manifesting in a way, in three levels. Yet not because he's got three personalities or anything like that, or the three split people. It's just one and the same reality. It depends on you. What you see of the Buddha depends upon your filters. It did 2,500 years ago, and it's the same now. How we see it is depending from where we come. There'll be even some people who, having seen the Buddha, will not like him. There's stories in the sutras about people encountering the Buddha and rejecting him, being jealous of him or rejecting him, or thinking it's fake or something like that, or just being skeptical. And I think I love it, there's a wonderful honesty about the sutras that they record these encounters. Because you can see really, truly, any responses is possible. There's even the young woman who wants to cause trouble, so she pretends that she's been seduced by the Buddha. It's a truly human story. It wasn't true, of course, but that's the kind of thing. People will project anything and see Buddha through all kinds of filters. Yeah, Buddha has nothing to prove, nothing to gain, nothing to put over. He's not trying to gain followers. He's not building an institution, not building a religion. If people come and ask, he will explain. In fact, they have to ask 3 times usually before he'll give them any teaching, just so that it's like clear that they should choose. If they want some advice, they're free to ask. Then they're free to follow it or not. Out of that kind of such simple kind of exchanges, yes, a whole religion is founded, but it's out of those exchanges. There's no committee, there's no commission, there's no managing board of Buddhism in Buddha's lifetime. There's just this guy, and people meet him and like him or ignore him and take something from it. Some dedicate the whole of their lives to it after that, whether as monastics or as lay people. Some maybe get something and then wander off and forget, but they've been benefited through that short exchange, through that small advice that Buddha may have given them. So I think that's how it is, and in a way, that how it unfolded. As I say, really, all of Buddhism came out of that. The different scriptures came out of that, because the scriptures, the three baskets of the teaching, as they're called, Sutra, Vinaya, Abhidhamma, they're all just the records of those conversations that Buddha had with people when they asked him questions. And even though some of them then have a literary gloss and the scene is described in amazing terms, mountains filled with people listening to the Buddha, gods and asuras there also listening to the Buddha. Why not? They also need help. But really, at its heart, all the sutras and tantras and all the scriptures are just conversations Buddha had with people. And the Buddhist religion, its organization, its monasteries, everything else, it spread into the different countries, all just came out of that. Ordinary human interactions that Buddha had over those 45 years of his life. Ordinary human interactions, but if you have the proper vision, it's an interaction with an ordinary human who is simultaneously the embodiment of all the three kayas, the Dhammakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Rupakaya. And all the teachings, from the simplest of teachings, like when Buddha simply advised to people who asked how to be wealthy, he said, give generously, practice charity. You become wealthy in that way. Right through to the most advanced, profound teachings on the nature of mind, the nature of reality. All those teachings were just in conversations that Buddha had with people asking questions. So the whole kind of 108 volumes of the scriptures that have been translated into Tibetan, all that just came from those conversations. And so did all the organizations. So did the three vehicles, the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, the Mahayana, common and uncommon Mahayana. All this came from the Buddha's conversations with people in northern India 2,500 years ago. So we ourselves, in practicing Buddhism, in a way we're repeating that. We're interacting. Now we're interacting with Buddha, not manifesting as an Indian guy, somewhere between the age of 35 and 80. We are interacting with his teachings and his instructions, which other men and women, rather like ourselves, have taken seriously, wanted to practice to some extent, had some understanding from, and just passed them and shared them down. But we can meet the Buddha. We can meet the Buddha today, of course, if we, uncover the nature of our mind, because there is the Buddha. He's in each, and the Buddha is in each and every one of us, because it's just the true nature of our mind. So why did the Buddha need to appear then? Well, because, as he put it himself, I'm just teaching something that's been long forgotten. Many people have known it before me. There have been many Buddhas, many enlightened, awakened people before me, and presumably on other planets and so on. Since beginner's time, that's been happening. But it had been forgotten in that cultural period. And so Buddha simply said it, having awakened from his own sleep of delusion. He just shared it with others who wanted to know about it. So therefore we are prompted by that to look inwards, to look into the nature of mind, and we have the tools and techniques to do so from the Buddha's advice. So although the Buddha is within us, the Buddha is, so to speak, waiting for us at home, somebody needs to tell us that. And therefore, Buddha appeared in India 2,500 years ago. Of course, as I was saying, Buddha appeared in India and was entirely at home with that, in the sense of he was, in a way, there. He was utterly present to Indian society. I don't mean by that he approved of everything in Indian society, no. Where he could see things that were causing suffering and difficulties, like sacrificing animals, and let alone human beings, and we could see a kind of foolish ideas, like that certain classes of people were naturally superior to others, naturally more spiritual to others. He rejected that and explained it's foolishness. But in other ways, he was entirely at ease with this world. So that one could say Buddha was here if Buddha was manifesting now, rather than as an Indian guy 2,500 years ago, he would be entirely fluent and fluent in this civilization too. He would be entirely at ease and able to converse in this language, so to speak. The central teachings would not change, of course. Selfishness is still the cause of suffering. Disturbing emotions still prompt us to actions which cause suffering, etc. Liberation is only possible through practicing a path that combines morality, meditation, wisdom. Those things don't change. But the language, the imagery, the kind of dress in which this would appear would be one that would be unique, that would be utterly suitable to the modern world. So we won't say Buddhas will appear in whatever guise is necessary, in whatever speak the language of whatever civilization, whatever culture they find themselves in. And so we're not therefore worshippers of an ancient Indian guy. I'm calling him an ancient Indian guy just to point out how the timeless interacts precisely with the human. Buddha was not a god, not somebody who descended from the heavens, who rose up from the earth, as Nagarjuna says in the friendly letter. Those who became great in the past were just once ordinary people like ourselves. They didn't fall from the sky like a god, nor did they rise up mysteriously from the earth. So just to talk about Buddha in his Indian setting is to say Buddha's always going to be a man or a woman of that particular place and time, and use that language. Yet at the same time, he uses that language, that culture, to point beyond it. So that we are still true heirs of Buddha now, even though our civilization is quite different, relatively different. Things have changed. We don't ride in chariots, we ride in cars. Some people even ride in riderless cars, driverless cars. Who knows? It's a changing world. But Buddha would still be supremely present to it if he was here. So that's so the story of Buddha is both ancient and modern. It always has been, it always will be. We bridged it when we, as heirs of this Indian prince, practice his teaching. We're not trying to reduplicate ancient Indian society. We're not trying to go back and garb ourselves in its language or its culture or its clothes. But at the same time, we recognize that from there was a doorway opened up to the timeless, and we can reopen it ourselves again now by practicing his teaching. So yeah, Buddha's present if you look for him or her. He's always present.